So, guys, I want to talk about the movie Virgin Punk, and I want to say that this is one of the worst films I've ever seen in my entire life. And definitely it reminded me of, the times that, when I first did movies and I didn't know how to make films. So I would just do a lot of things that were, just cardinal sins in filmmaking. And with this film, with Virgin Punk, some of the issues are this that in the beginning, it takes maybe like 10 minutes to get into the movie because they show a bunch of advertisements to anime conventions, and then they also show like reminders of, hey, you know what, stay at the end to see the behind the scenes. And then what happens is that they do that very repeatedly before you get to the movie. So it's almost like, imagine Demon Slayer is a 2.5 hour movie. So imagine if, it took like a half an hour of behind the scenes footage before the movie starts, and then at the end, they added an extra 2 hours of behind the scenes and all that. Like, it's important to see what people do and understand that filmmaking is very hard and there's a lot of expectations, but sometimes when you throw it in there, it's not appropriate. But I felt that it did like more damage than good to do that. The other thing about this film is that before it starts, you have to deal with like another 10 minutes of of seeing the director and being interviewed and him being interviewed and being talked to, and I didn't really appreciate that because, again, sometimes when people are paying for a movie, we're paying for the movie. We're not paying to hear somebody talk about his schedule or his excitement for this film, because sometimes it does feel a little arrogant, and sometimes it feels like, in the case of this, that the movie's actually like 35 minutes. It's really just a short film, so you're trying to add all this extra like behind the scenes stuff and advertisement to make it feature length, because there's actually rules. I believe you have to have 88 minutes to make it feature length, but most people do like 90 minutes. But that's just unacceptable, really, because I remember like when I used to shoot footage for public access. They wanted me to shoot stuff at the New Haven Green. I remember like making it like out 1 hour or 2 hours because I would be including like random footage or make it really artsy or whatever. Really, like I just had to learn sometimes less is more. Than you say, hey, you know what, this should be a 15-minute thing, or how do you lengthen something, and how do you lengthen something appropriately. But here, I felt that that there are a few issues. That 30 minutes wasn't enough. This should have been 90 minutes. And the next thing I want to say is that the ending of this is like a cliffhanger, so it just feels very anticlimactic. And I kind of wonder. And they said that if they spent 10 years on this project, that was definitely a wasted time, in my opinion, because there's a lot of people who create short films and they have like projects of this length, and it doesn't take that long. So definitely, I just feel that this was more like a passion project where the director wanted to take all the time that he wanted to take, really. And definitely, I would say with Yasuomi Uematsu, there's other things that I didn't like about this film, that I feel that he definitely has character reincarnations, and that just means you have a director who takes a character that they like and then they just do some changes on it every single film, and that's not good in some cases, because that feels like, and that's almost like in repeat mode. So I just don't appreciate that. I think he needs to move on from Sawa, and also that creepy guy from the first Kite film. I just think he has to do something a little bit out of his comfort zone. If this doesn't do well in the box office, or if people just are more honest about it not being a good film, I really think that he has time with his life to just do something a little bit different, really. I do feel that he recycles those characters a lot. And then another big issue is that Sawa is a very, very controversial character, because if you watch Kite, she is sexually assaulted, and there's two versions of Kite. There is Kite where It's censored. They don't show the sexual assault scenes, and then there's the uncensored version where they show the sexual assault scenes, and it's basically a child porn. And I should be saying it as it is, really, because I'm just not going to sugarcoat it. It's not appropriate, but it really is child porn. But to use that character over and over is just not good. It's cringeworthy, and it's also not good that you're even using the predator, the person who raped her, as a teenager to actually reappear in this film as well. Really, it's just it's definitely kind of cringeworthy. So I'm just not sure what's his obsession with those characters. Is he somebody who feels like he cannot go forward with different characters and different ideas? And I think that, sometimes you may want to retire that, because obviously they represent something that may have been okay in the 90s, because in the 90s was about shock value and edgy, and nowadays a film like Kite can honestly, hurt his reputation because people have just different attitudes. And even if he said something, and I believe one of the interviews said about Kite, the reason why he had the sexual assault scenes, it was just to build a dimension of character. And that goes down to that thing about is it free speech, or is it free speech, and is it building a character, or is it like a little too much, really? Because there's books like Clockwork Orange. If you guys don't remember, there's a scene in the movie Clockwork Orange where Alex has sex with two women, but in the book the character Alex actually drugs two underage girls and sexually assaults them. Or in Midnight Cowboy, there's flashbacks of him having a relationship, and Joe Buck gets sexually assaulted by he and his girlfriend. In Midnight Cowboy, Joe Buck in the movie he and his girlfriend get sexually assaulted by a group of people. But in the book, it's about him as a teenager, and as a teenager he meets a girl that's sexually open, who's a teenager as well, really. And there's reasons why, when people have to make choices about the stories that they want to tell, most of them choose not to go and talk about child sexuality, because that's such a heavy issue, and depicting it. So I really just kind of wonder why he kind of resurrects these characters that were associated with such a very controversial movie. Why is he doing incarnations of these characters? I think he needs to kind of get over it. And then also you have Sal up here naked a bunch of times, really. I think that the character that this guy is, the Predator character from Kite, he reappears. He's the same type of creepy and whatever, really. So it's kind of like, as I said, it's just like it really is high risk, high reward with this. But I really would say that you have a 30-minute movie, which is all right, maybe a passable anime movie, but it would have been passable if it was 90 minutes instead of just 35 minutes and oversaturation of interviews and whatever, really. And I also will say that on top of that, a lot of people were walking out during the behind the scenes. Actually, I think I stayed there for maybe roughly 50 minutes, and there's probably another 30 minutes, to go, really. So, so that does say something when, people are actually walking out of your film, because it's just not that good, really. So it's definitely very unfortunate that Virgin Punk, it's not a good film. It relies way too much on the behind the scenes, and ultimately it reminds me a lot of times when I was a young director and young filmmaker, and I would overextend things because I didn't have the story at the right length, really. So it's definitely a very amateur project. And it's very unfortunate that they chose to do that.